นะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะพุทธังธัมมังสังฆังนัมมัสสามิ Blessings, good evening. I just returned from New Zealand, where I accompanied Luang Por Liam from Wat Papong, Ajahn Chah's monastery. After visiting different monasteries in Australia, he's currently in New Zealand, so I accompanied him for a part of that trip. And it's nice to see how inspiring it is for Buddhists in different parts of the world when they get the chance to meet very peaceful, wise teachers such as Luang Por Liam. He was last in New Zealand 25 years ago, more or less, which is a long time. A lot has happened in 25 years. So it was good for them to have the chance to meet him, hear his Dhamma, make offerings, be in his presence. This is one part of our refuge as people interested in following the Buddha's teachings. We take refuge in the Buddha himself, the Buddha, the historical Buddha, but also the quality of knowing the truth that can have such a powerful, good effect on a human mind. And we take refuge in the Dhamma, the truth, as well as the teachings, the path that helps us to know and see the truth. But also the Sangha. The Sangha includes the qualities of Sangha, those who have practiced and realized the Dhamma, following in the Buddha's footsteps. So the Sila, the Samadhi, the Panya, the different qualities that Sangha embody, we take refuge in them. But of course, it's inspiring to actually meet people who have practiced what the Buddha taught. Luang Por Liam came to live at Wat Nong back in 1969. He's been a monk for almost 62 years of his life, and most of that time he spent living at Wat Nong, although he has many other monasteries, Sangha, monks, nuns under his guidance. But he's spent his life practicing what the Buddha taught, the Dhamma, the Vinaya, and practicing what his teacher, the same as my teacher, Luang Por Chah, taught, and then serving the Sangha. So he has a wealth of experience, not just book knowledge, but direct experience of the human mind and the path of practice that leads to liberation. Very wise and accomplished monk. So it's the good fortune of the Buddhists of Australia and New Zealand to have the chance to meet him, because obviously he doesn't come across to this part of the world very often. And the spreading of the teachings by Sangha has had a huge impact on the world since the time of the Buddha. And the Buddha himself sent out the first Sangha members, the first 60 arahants, we say, according to the texts, went out in different directions. The Buddha encouraged them to go in different directions for the benefit of the many, rather than all going into the same place where it might be nice to have a concentration of enlightened beings in one place, but then of course that's a bit limiting. But if they go in different directions, then many different people can benefit from meeting them, supporting them, listening to their teachings, getting guidance from them. So Buddhism spread in that way, to the north, the south, the east, the west, from where the Buddha was living in northern India. Spread around the world, largely through Sangha. Monks and nuns going off walking or travelling, sometimes travelling with traders, so in caravans in those days, whether it's on horseback, camel, or just travelling in groups, sometimes by boat or ship. Little by little, slowly, the teachings of the Buddha have spread around Asia and then gradually out from Asia around the whole world. As we know, there are Buddhist practitioners in every corner of the world these days. And Luang Por Liam himself has been to North, South America, Asia, Australia, New Zealand, Europe, and so on. He's been to many different parts of the world. Following in that tradition, that practice of taking the teachings, making them available for the many. But the way Buddhist teachings have spread has been a very organic one. And the Buddha didn't encourage monks or nuns to just try and convert people, thinking of the numbers, so go out and grab a few more people to be Buddhists today. Didn't use that approach. He encouraged Sangha to practice the Dhamma, the Vinaya, the Sila, Samadhi, Panya, practice for themselves, to realize the Dhamma, understand it for themselves, and then to trust in the goodness of that to attract or inspire others to want to practice. So rather than trying to convert or force anyone to practice Buddhism, the message has always been, well, this is a good teaching that will help you to be free from suffering, but it's up to you. If you're interested, then you come and see. So the Dhamma is, it's akaliko, ehipasiko, pachatang. It's encouraging investigation. It's apparent here and now, to be known individually by those who practice and gain the wisdom from the practice. The nature of the Dhamma is it's the truth, so it kind of draws us in. When we're in the right frame of mind, we start looking for the truth. Then it draws us in, encourages us to be curious, to investigate. But it tends to be the Sangha who bring the Dhamma first around the world. Not the Sangha alone, the Sangha practice with and in harmony with laity, of course. But it tends to be the Sangha who take the lead and have taken the lead historically It's one of life's highest blessings, the Buddha said, to see Sangha or meet Sangha. Samananancha dasanang, to see renunciants, people who have left the home life, put on robes, taken precepts, gone through an ordination procedure, practice and trained in quiet places, learning to quieten their mind and develop insight into the teachings. This is one of life's highest blessings. So you could see that in a place like, say, New Zealand. There's not that many Buddhist monks and nuns. And there are more nowadays than there used to be, but they're still in very small numbers. So it's a blessing when Sangha comes through to teach. But how do we meet with that blessing? Well, we have to maybe appreciate our good fortune and keep up the practice, both through gratitude and appreciation, and maybe also through heedfulness. We don't always get these opportunities to meet Sangha, hear the teachings, or practice the teachings. Life is not always smooth and easy. We say life is not always fair, in the sense we've all accumulated karma from the past, good and bad. And sometimes our misfortune comes up, obstacles arise that take away our chance to practice. You never know. At the airport in Auckland, I was talking to one of the Buddhists there who was saying that they've just come to the Dhamma the last few years because they had a car accident. Luckily they survived with only minor injuries, but the car was destroyed. But it made them really appreciate how fragile life is and how easily our opportunity to practice the Dhamma, hear the Dhamma, can be taken away from us. And we all know this truth, that it's so easy to get absorbed and lost into work, routines, social things, family and so on, but completely forget the Dhamma. It's so easy. So sometimes it is a wake-up call when we have a crisis or a problem arise or something comes up that points us back to the Dhamma, reminds us of the impermanence of life, the fragility of life, old age, sickness, different kinds of problems come up that we face. And they kind of push us back to the Dhamma. And they remind us this is something that's available to us and we can really make use of it for our happiness. Why not? The nature of the untrained, unenlightened human mind is that we get deluded. The Buddha even said intoxicated. Just like when we get drunk on alcohol or lost, fuzzy-headed because of various drugs, whether they're medicinal drugs or recreational drugs. When you become intoxicated, you don't know anything. You may feel some pleasure, but you're lost in your own little world, as it were, until you sober up. And sometimes events in our life sober us up, wake us up. Maybe one moment you have a chance to practice Dhamma, hear the Dhamma, and the next moment you've lost that chance. And just life itself, it's whizzing by, isn't it? That's my feeling. Living in the world, time whizzes by. As I said, Lumpur Liam didn't go to New Zealand for about 25 years. So that I can remember the last time he went. And there's been that gap between those two visits. It just reminds one how time whizzes by, passes by quickly, and suddenly you're at the end of your life. Maybe it seems like almost just a few minutes ago you're at the beginning of your life, now you're at the end of your life. And of course that means less chance, less time available to practice Dhamma. This is the point the Buddha was making. We're born into this world. That's our good fortune, to be born into a human form. We're intelligent beings. We have intelligence. We have the ability to learn, remember, train, communicate. All kinds of amazing things, which much of the time we're taking for granted. But at the same time, we can easily get lost in life, intoxicated with the world, the pain, the pleasure, the ups and downs of life, and forget the Dhamma altogether very easily. And there are different things we call devadutas. One of them is seeing the renunciant, the monk or the nun, that person who's dedicated their life to the practice. That's one very powerful devaduta or teacher, heavenly messenger, brings us back to remind us of the practice. It could be something more indirect, just like listening to a Dhamma talk on a computer or in your car or something. That's a bit like seeing a monk or a nun. You're just hearing the voice of them. But it could also be your own experience of aging or sickness or an accident or some kind of unexpected crisis coming up in your life, some problem arises, can be the trigger for you to return to the Dhamma. Just as like when you meditate, as you might have noticed a few moments ago, when you're meditating and you're lost in a train of thought, that's like your moment of intoxication. And you're not really very mindful, even though you might tell yourself you're being mindful of the breath. You've probably all had the experience. You can convince yourself you're watching the breath go in and out, but at the same time you're thinking 101 other things. Planning, scheming, reacting, happy, sad, all at the same time it seems. But basically that's what intoxication is. Trains of thought, moods, pain and pleasure, taking away your mind, so you're not really very mindful in the present moment, but you're lost in a stream of thought or perhaps falling asleep. But then when you finally regain some mindfulness, that's the moment of sobering up from your intoxication, isn't it? Back to the present moment. This is what we're aiming for, number one kind of priority in our practice, whether it's in meditation or just in our day. Coming back to the present moment awareness. And in New Zealand we were reflecting on this with the lay Sangha and laity there, on the benefits of living with a good teacher or being in close contact with good teachers such as Luang Por Chah. What do people remember of Luang Por Chah? One thing was that he was very good at waking people up from their intoxicated state. When you drift off into a daydream, a stream of thought, wanting something, not wanting something, liking something, disliking something, following a stream of thought based around a certain view or an opinion on something. Ajahn Chah was very good at pulling people out of that, simply waking them up into the present moment. Even when he was ill, he could do that with a simple cough or clearing his throat. So people such as myself and other Sangha members who looked after him when he was sick, he wasn't giving formal talks anymore, but a monk could be sitting, meditating, or doing some activity quietly, trying to be mindful, but then lost in a particular mood or train of thought, and their mind is no longer present in the present moment, no longer mindful in the present moment, and Ajahn Chah would just give a well-timed cough or clear his throat, partly out of the love of the teacher, respect of the teacher, partly out of just awareness of the sound. Then the mind comes back to the present moment. So even a cough can be a teaching method. Of course, when he was stronger and teaching with words, then it could be a timely word, picking up on somebody who is getting lost in their moods or a particular state of mind. You might say something just to bring them out of that state, wake them up, bring them back to the present moment, make a comment, direct comment or an indirect comment. And many monks used to help massage him. It's something we do for our teachers as monks. We massage the teacher late at night, maybe give them a foot massage. Ajahn Chah might be receiving a foot massage and himself being very tired, having taught all day long, start nodding off. And when he starts nodding off, the monks think, oh, now is the time I can go back and have my own sleep. Because you don't want to leave the teacher that you respect when he's awake and teaching. But if he's asleep, then if you feel, oh, I can now go off and have my own sleep. Then Ajahn Chah just making a few gestures or a word when the monks are starting to move away, just say, oh, you missed a bit. You didn't get that bit of the foot or that bit of the leg. I need that bit rubbed because there's some pain there. So the monk has to come back and carry on massaging when they'd rather be asleep or they're actually falling asleep. Or a monk who is just laughing too much or talking too much or indulging in something or other, eating too much, sleeping too much, something too much. Then Ajahn Chah might just say a few words, bring the mind of that monk back to the present moment and back to the right amount. He talked a lot about extremes in life, how we tend to swing between extremes. We're either eating too much or getting upset and angry with our attachment to food, and so we're eating too little, or fasting and making life hard for ourselves. Talking too much, or else saying, well, I'm not going to talk to anyone, and going silent. Liking one thing, disliking another. People tend to go to extremes. They indulge. He said, there's the extreme of sensual indulgence on one side. He would use the Buddha's word, karma sukhalikanu yoga. Indulgence in sensuality, sight, sound, taste, smell, touch, seeking pleasure in all the different sensual experience, and often to the point of where it was extreme, too much. Or people going to the other extreme of cutting everything off because they're so upset with themselves, self-critical, upset, annoyed with themselves for having indulged too much before, going to the other extreme of cutting everything off, cutting everything out, not sleeping, not eating, not doing anything, but basing often that coming out of aversion rather than from wisdom. For that he'd use the word attakilamatana yoga, self-deprivation. So practitioners, both Sangha and laity, tend to fall into these two categories. One moment we're indulging, one moment we're getting upset, angry, and cutting everything off. So Ajahn Chah would often talk about that level of practice that is just right, podi, in the middle. Finding that level for yourself, because it may vary between people, how much we sleep, eat, talk, meditate, the activities we perform every day. One person's level may be slightly different from another. but the idea is to find the level that is just right for you, to help you go against the stream of intoxication and bring up mindfulness. So Luang Por Chah was very good at this. Sometimes he would use sense of humour, sometimes he'd use quite serious reflections. So he was often very down to earth, practical. Sometimes he was quiet, sometimes he talked a lot. He had a whole array of different skills, but those Sangha and laity who live with him and practice with him remember this, his ability just to help people cut through their delusions, the confusions of life. A well-timed word, a reminder of something that they knew already but had forgotten, so just reminding people that everything is impermanent, reminding people that things are just ordinary, because when we get lost in our moods, we tend to make things out of the ordinary. So we get really high when things go well, and we feel really low when things go badly. So one of his favourite reflections was, it's just ordinary. Tammada. The word tammada comes from Dhamma. There's one angle, one way of looking at our experience with the light of Dhamma, the light of truth. It's just ordinary. Old age, sickness and death are just ordinary. The weather is hot, the weather is cold, it's just ordinary. The price of things is going up, the price of things is going down, it's just ordinary. You feel tired, you feel energetic, it's just ordinary. He'd use that phrase quite a lot just to help people come to terms with different experiences they're having and not to get lost or intoxicated by the experiences of the world, what we call the worldly dhammas, the worldly winds. It's just ordinary. Even when things can seem extraordinary, they're still just ordinary. If it rains a lot and you get flooding like they have in New Zealand this year, Auckland is flooded a lot, it's still flooding. It's not pleasant, it's not nice, it's unfortunate, but it's also just ordinary. Sometimes you get a lot of rain. Sometimes you get drought. Sometimes you get just the average rainfall. It's just ordinary. And this is what a well-trained mind sees in life. It sees all these different experiences really are just ordinary. And not to just react with extremes all the time, wanting, not wanting, liking, disliking. Those who lived and practiced with Ajahn Chah, they got that kind of reflection, to see the ordinariness of life, of experience. But of course, to see the ordinariness of things, your mind has to be prepared for it through the practice. It has to be in a place where there's mindfulness, there's clarity, and we have to train ourselves to reflect on things, to cultivate this ability to look, learn, observe from our experience. The mind of intoxication doesn't see the ordinariness of things. It tends to go to extremes. So we get high and low, upset, sad, angry, desiring things, so feeling very discontent because we want more. The mind that is far from the Dhamma is experiencing all those emotions and the ups and downs and the turmoils of life. So we have to prepare our mind to see the Dhamma and understand the Dhamma as ordinary by cultivating the path. Like the practice of sila, precepts, whether you're a laity or sangha. It's another way he'd describe it. You bring this practice of sila, morality, virtuous conduct of speech, and action just brings your mind to this state of normality, ordinariness, where it's just at ease, at peace within itself, because you're not stirring yourself up by doing a lot of things that hurt you or hurt others. You're living in a harmless way with some integrity, so you get some self-respect, and you feel reasonably at ease within yourself. You're not guilty, you're not self-critical. That's another form of being with the ordinary. It's just ordinary to go about your business, but without killing, stealing, harming others in one way or another. Then practicing mindfulness in daily life, sitting, walking, standing, lying down. You'd hear this phrase all the time from Ajahn Chah. Bring up the mindfulness, the present moment awareness. So you know who you are, what you're doing, where you're going, why you're doing things. To know the Dhamma, the truth, we have to be aware, pay attention, and observe the way things are. Even if you've remembered a lot, read a lot, that can be helpful to have the knowledge, but we also need to know in the moment what we're doing. If you're going somewhere, to know why you're going. If you're doing something, to know why you're doing it, what's going on. It's the opposite of intoxication, isn't it? When you have present moment awareness, mindfulness, clarity, you're not intoxicated. When you're intoxicated, you're lost. You don't know really what you're doing. Your body may be there, but your mind could be miles away. So monks such as Lumpur Liam and many others, this is what they got from Ajahn Chah. Of course, they put their own effort into the practice until they become their own teacher, their own practitioner. But whether it's the Buddha or Ajahn Chah or any other teacher, this is what they're encouraging us to do, to cultivate this ability to be present in the moment and then to reflect on the truth of what's going on with clarity. Just coming to see it. It's just the ordinary nature of things that you have a human body. Sometimes you feel hot, sometimes you feel cold, depending on the conditions. It's healthy, it becomes ill, it's getting older. Other people sometimes treat us well, sometimes treat us not so well. This is just the ordinary experience of living in the world. When you see the ordinary, your mind doesn't create suffering or stress out of those things. When there's mindfulness and this reflective ability of the mind, we can just know experience without creating, adding on, without mental proliferation. When we're intoxicated, we go the other way. We create suffering. Even if we experience pleasant things, good things, we get lost in them when we're intoxicated. We want them more, we want to hold on to them, keep them, repeat them. We don't want to lose them. And unpleasant experiences, of course, we react with aversion, fear. We create suffering out of the unpleasant. But the mind that sees Dhamma or knows Dhamma is seeing them as just ordinary. Pain is like this, pleasure is like that. It's just the way things are. And they're all impermanent and they're all not self. We come into this world as a human being but we have to cultivate the mind further. That's just the starting point. Being born as a human being, we have this great potential to learn, and if we come in contact with the Dhamma, the teachings of the Buddha, that's a great good fortune. But these have to be put into practice. We have to bring this potential out through the practice, through training, through cultivation of these qualities. It's not always easy, of course, because the reason we get intoxicated is because we follow habits. Largely it's habitual reactions, trains of thought that take over the mind. So we know something for a moment and then we fall back into our mind of mental proliferation or creating. And when we do that, then we lose awareness of the truth. We lose awareness of impermanence, lose awareness of the selfless nature of phenomena. We don't see that a mood or a mental state is just a mental state. We believe it, we become it. So we become happy. But of course then that lays the grounds for suffering when it passes. We become sad, we become angry. People who are new to Buddhism often have a doubt. They think, well, if you take away all these highs and lows, ups and downs of life, then it becomes kind of meaningless. There's nothing left. Of course, the mind that sees the ordinary nature of experience, sees experience as impermanent, as not self, is a mind free from suffering, free from this mental proliferation which keeps creating suffering in our mind. So it's not meaningless at all. It's actually the highest peace. The mind that is not creating suffering out of its experience is a peaceful, happy mind. It's the mind that it's in a good state, its best state. You could say a superior state. The mind that's endlessly creating, reacting to things, creating self out of experience, is suffering. It gets tired, mentally tired as well as physically tired. It gets lost. Intoxication doesn't lead to good things, does it? It leads to mental tiredness, instability, mistakes, problems. The mind of clarity, of mindfulness, and the reflective mind is a mind that's in a good space, good mental health, and doesn't create suffering out of its experience. It sees things as ordinary, but then that's because it's seeing with clarity. This is what we call the eye of Dhamma, seeing the truth. The well-trained mind sees truth, the true nature of things. Much of the time, unfortunately, we're not with the eye of Dhamma, we're with the eye of the world. So we have eyes. Even if you have fading eyesight, you need help, you can still see something. But these are the worldly eyes that see colour, forms, shapes, and then start to proliferate and create and condition things out of it. So you see something and you get lost in, oh, what was that? I like that. I don't like that. What is that? What's its name? And we create our world through what we see, and of course the same for the other senses, what we hear, we taste, smell, touch. And the world can be a fascinating place, but endless proliferation is very tiring. You mentally, having proliferated all day long, you get to the end of the day, it's quite tiring, isn't it? You've been thinking through the day, creating things, reacting to things, liking and disliking. By the end of the day, when you go to sleep, it's like, oh, you need a rest. It's one reason we physically need sleep as human beings, is because we've been thinking so much, engaging with the world through our senses through the day, and creating happiness and sadness all the time. So that's why Ajahn Chah used to say, when you go to sleep, practice mindfulness as you're falling asleep, whether you're reciting Buddho, 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 or following the breathing. Then you have a chance to actually let go of some of this mental proliferation that otherwise can often keep us awake. If you go to sleep proliferating with anxiety, worry about tomorrow, or being angry about things that have come up earlier today, or lost in desire, you don't sleep so well. You don't necessarily go into states of deep sleep for very long. You often wake up not very peaceful. And if you can train yourself to practice mindfulness before you fall asleep, it's a very skillful thing to do. Maybe even that mindfulness carries on as you're falling into sleep. There's a certain heightened awareness, heightened mindfulness. Sometimes it even seems like the mind is awake even though the body is sleeping. The body is resting, but the mind is just quietly awake. But the mind that sees the Dhamma, sees the ordinary nature of experience, is the mind that is not prone to proliferation. So as you train, as you practice more, then the proliferation of the mind fades, gets less. We experience more peace. Another thing people doubt about this is they say, well, it must mean you're not creative anymore. You can't create things, solve problems, do some of the things that people want to do. But maybe it's the opposite. Maybe if your mind is not proliferating and creating all kinds of moods, ups and downs, likes and dislikes, maybe that frees up the creative capacity of the mind. So you can actually work better, solve problems better, create new things better. But at least it's coming from a place of peace, in non-proliferation, non-distraction, non-intoxication. And the most useful things we can create is the understanding of the Dhamma, just knowing this is the way things are. Another thought arises, passes away, another feeling, another emotion arises, passes away. This body experiences pleasure and pain and is aging from moment to moment. It's arising, passing away from moment to moment. That's the way things are. When we get more and more familiar with the unconditioned, then we tend to see the Dhamma more. This is something that many people have found from Luang Por Chah's teachings. They point us in that direction, wake us up, help us to let go of this endless proliferation and experience some real inner peace, deep, profound peace. So we were reflecting on that a couple of days ago in New Zealand, where I was travelling with Luang Por Liam, and he himself seems to embody that as well. A very peaceful presence. It's our good fortune to have met him and been with him. So maybe tonight I'll leave you with those reflections, and after this there may be some time for Q&A.